How old is our civilization? When it comes to the first civilizations, we often mention the ancient Sumerian one, the ancient Egyptian one, the civilization of ancient India, or civilizations of South and Central America. However, what if I told you that all of these civilizations considered themselves not to be the first ones, but actually to be the descendants of much older civilizations that were long lost and forgotten? Impossible? In this episode, we'll try to answer the question, how old is our civilization? We'll see many ancient texts that point to the much older roots of humanity that are considered by the mainstream scholars. My name is Alexander, I am a Polish researcher and author of Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, my book about lost civilizations, cyclical time and previous races. So if you're interested in the biggest secrets of our past, don't forget to check out my book, links in the description, and also don't forget to subscribe to my channel for much more content on the topics of ancient mysteries, spirituality and many other stuff. In this episode, we'll try to answer the question of how old our civilization really is. And actually, I think that we should start with how old humanity really is. And the anatomically modern humans appeared about 200,000 years ago. And it is very interesting because the first settlements appeared only about 12,000 years ago, so about 10,000 years BC. On the other hand, to take it further, the first civilizations appeared between about 4,000 years BC, and on the entire world they appeared suddenly about 3,100 years BC. So as we can see from this time scale, for the entire existence of humans, for about 95% of our existence, there was nothing. Actually, and literally, there happened nothing. Only about the end of our existence there appeared first settlements and first civilizations. So, did humanity really was so stagnant? Or actually in this very distant past that, according to mainstream historians, nothing happened. In this time frame, could there be lost civilizations? Could humanity achieve such greatness to create civilizations, settlements, cities, to create works of art, or to write books? Actually, according to many ancient sources, that was how our history really unfolded. According to many ancient texts from the oldest civilizations, during these old days, humans were not just hunter-gatherers, but were actually the dwellers of previous civilizations. And when it comes to those first civilizations mentioned at the beginning, actually all of them speak about that. Because when it comes to the Mesopotamia, we've got, for instance, the Sumerian king's list. And according to the Sumerian king's list, the kingship was lowered from heaven actually about 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. So as we see, just about at the beginning of humanity. And at that time, the rulers were living for a very long time. Some of them even ruled for tens of thousands of years. So it is very incredible. And some may say that it is a mere fantasy, but according to many other sources from all around the world, the situation looks the same. And we've got Mesopotamia, according to which the civilization was much older and was a pre-Diluvian civilization which was ended by the Great Flood. And as I mentioned in my other video about the Great Flood and the geological evidence, there are plenty of myths all around the world that point to the reality of the Great Flood, and as I mentioned, we've got even geological evidence for it. So as we see, we've got mentions of 100,000 of years old civilization that was before the flood. As I mentioned, the same situation can be found in ancient Egypt, and we've got three main sources that are really accurate and that depict the entire chronology of ancient Egypt, and actually the mainstream scholars use these three sources, which are the Palermo stone, which is the Manetho King's List, and which is the Turin's King's List, also called the Turin's Canon. And all of these three sources really depict the chronology of ancient Egyptian rulers with a very great accuracy. There are these three sources, all of them from different periods of time, and all of them speak about plus minus the same rulers. There are some discrepancies, however, looking broadly, there are in about 70 to 80% accurate and speak of the same rulers of ancient Egypt. However, modern Egyptology only accepts the rulers which are after Menes, and Menes, also called Narmer, was the first pharaoh of ancient Egypt according to mainstream archaeology, mainstream history, and Menes or Narmer actually united the lower and upper Egypt into one great Egyptian state. It was roughly 3100 years BC. And according to all of these three sources, the history of Egypt is much older than that, because as I mentioned, modern Egyptologists only accept the rulers that are after Menes. However, in all of these three sources, before Menes, there were demigods and gods who ruled Egypt before the Great Catastrophe. There are also mentions of floodings, which may be just local floodings of the Nile that were very frequent during the ancient times. However, the history of ancient Egypt, or let's say prehistoric Egypt, according to these three sources, actually takes us back about 30 to 39,000 years BC. So as we say, it is about 10 times more than is accepted by modern Egyptologists. And as we saw with the case of the Sumerian civilization, it shouldn't be a surprise for us. Our ancient ancestors thought that our civilization is much older, which is even possible looking at the 200,000 years of the existence of anatomically modern humans. Now, let's move on to ancient India. Again, according to mainstream scientists, the history of ancient India is that about 10,000 years BC there appeared first settlements, which was casual also in the area of Mesopotamia. However, these settlements were just small cities and small settlements. We cannot speak back then about a civilization. The first civilizations were the Harappan one and the Mohenjo-daro, and these two civilizations were actually very advanced and appeared suddenly, and there are several different dates when it comes to their appearance. Some say that it is about 3500 years BC, some say it is about 3100 years BC, but again, it is the same time period that is accepted by modern Egyptologists and by modern scholars when it comes to the ancient Mesopotamia. However, when it comes to ancient India, there are plenty of sources that speak of previous civilizations. In India, there is also a flood myth of Manu, who takes 7 sages, 7 rishis with him to actually rebuild civilization after the Great Flood. According to the Hindu thought, the catastrophes and civilizations are totally cyclical. We've got the yugas, which are cycles of time, and actually the Kali Yuga, which is the Dark Age, appeared about, and it is not about, it is the actual date of 18th of February 3102 years BC. So actually it very coincides with the sudden appearance of the civilization, this chronological civilization of ancient Egypt, ancient Sumeria, and of these Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilizations. Is it a coincidence? It may be, however, according to the Hindu thought, this Kali Yuga started with a total reset of the previous civilization. And according to many ancient texts, we've got a mention that at the beginning of Kali Yuga there appeared a global deluge which destroyed previous civilizations, and then the civilization was rebuilt anew. So as we see, we've got mention of cyclical resets and cyclical civilizations. And it's very interesting because in India there are many texts, and some of the texts, for instance Mahabharata and Ramayana, which are two of the oldest epics on the world. Also we may say that the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest. However, these dates are roughly similar because the first traditions were transmitted orally, and we do not know how old are these traditions, how old are these texts, because they were just transmitted orally. They were not written down until, let's say, 2000 years BC. And both of the texts, Ramayana and Mahabharata, speak about the prehistory of Indian continent. They speak about the Rama Empire. Mahabharata speak of many different kingdoms which were so populated that during a single battle of Kurukshetra more than 1 billion people died. So as we see, these civilizations were enormous. They could really be as large as the modern humanity when it comes to these numbers. And it's very interesting because some of the dates from other texts from the Indian continent, like for instance the Silapatikaram or other texts of the Tamils, which are a nation in India, speak about the same dates as other texts, as I mentioned in my video about lost civilizations and the Great Flood, because in my opinion the Great Flood actually occurred at the end of the last ice age, during which period the true flood occurred because it was the end of the last ice age and there were sudden meltings of the glaciers. Also, this is the time period between 10,500 years BC and 9,500 years BC. Actually, in this period, or just after this period, there appeared first settlements, as I mentioned. Also, according to Plato, there was a tradition in Egypt of Atlantis, and Atlantis also, according to Plato, existed about 9,600 years BC. Also, when it comes to the Silapatikaram and other Tamil texts, they've got the tradition of the previous civilizations called the Sangams. And Sangams, actually, one of those Sangams was destroyed during the Great Flood that, according to Tamils, was about 9,500 years BC. So as we see, many of these texts speak about tens of thousands of years old civilization that was totally annihilated about 9,500 years ago, which is the end of the last ice age, during which the sea levels rose about 120 meters, and all around the world there sank a total area of about 25 million square kilometers. So as we see, our civilization may be much older than it is thought that by the mainstream. So now we've covered the traditions from the oldest civilizations of Mesopotamia, India and ancient Egypt. However, we have to also take a closer look at the stories from the Central America, because these stories are also not only very interesting, but also are pointing to the same time period just as we mentioned earlier. And actually, according to, for instance, Mayan tradition, according to Mayan codices that survived to our times, there may be two different civilizations that were destroyed during the Great Flood, during a single event of the very distant past. And one of these civilizations was on the Atlantic Ocean, the other one was on the Pacific Ocean. And according to the Mayas, just as these civilizations were destroyed, there was an influx of people from them to the Central America. That's how the true main tribes of Mayas appeared. And according to several different codices, this event was about 8 to 9 3000 years before these codices were written down. So as we see also this date may coincide with the previous Sangams, with the Plato's Atlantis, etc. So as we see again in the Mayan stories, we've got mentions of a civilization that is not just 2 or 3000 years old, but which is actually 9000 years old, as was the case with many different civilizations. We've got also the Aztecs, who were to descend from the lost land of Aztlan or Atitlan. And the name Aztlan and Atitlan is very common, for instance, to the Plato's Atlantis. We've got the same Atl at the beginning, Atlantis. Aztlan, Atitlan. And also, as I mentioned in my other videos and in my book Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, in many different traditions from all around the world, from Basques and many other cultures, we've got other names. We've got Atli, Atala, and as we see, all of these names speak of the previous world, of the previous civilizations, and they even contain the same name inside of them. And in my opinion, as we see, when it comes to all these myths, stories and legends, it couldn't be a coincidence that all of the ancient people that are, according to the mainstream, most ancient ones, speak that they were not first, that they were the descendants of much older civilizations that could really be between, let's say, 9600 years BC, and even they could go back 30-40,000 years BC, which, as we've seen at the beginning of this video, is maybe true, because we've seen this time span of humanity stretching back to about 200,000 years. So why, if anatomically modern humans lived for 200,000 years, why couldn't the first civilizations appear, let's say, 50, 30, 40,000 years BC? In my opinion, it is totally logical, and as we see, it couldn't be a coincidence that people all around the world speak about the same lost civilizations. If you are interested, don't forget to check out my other videos on my channel, and also don't forget to check out my book Deja Vu Has Everything Already Been, and my other shorter handbooks if you don't want to read a long one, like the Giza Pyramids Alignment Guide. All links are down below. You can also join our Facebook group. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and many other platforms. That would be all for today. Thank you for your attention, and goodbye to the next video.